Jacob Roberts always believed that his marriage to Emma was rooted in a strong foundation. They had been together for nearly a decade, sharing laughter, facing challenges, and building dreams side by side. Their story began in their early 20s in Melbourne. Jacob was a junior engineer on a mixed-use construction project, while Emma, fresh out of university, was beginning her career in marketing. One of the qualities Jacob admired most about Emma was her ambition. Her determination was inspiring, her charisma undeniable, and she had an uncanny ability to navigate the corporate world with ease. Emma's rapid rise in her career surprised no one. By her mid-30s, she was already a senior marketing executive at Sanderson Enterprises, one of Australia's leading property development firms. Jacob, on the other hand, was content in his role as a construction manager. It wasn't glamorous, but it provided stability and a comfortable life for them both. They were happy, or so Jacob thought. In recent months, Emma seemed different. She had become distant, her mind often preoccupied. Late nights at work had become routine, explained away by client meetings or urgent dinners. Her phone, once carelessly left on the kitchen counter, now rarely left her side and was always placed face down. Jacob tried not to let his imagination get the better of him, but unease crept in when Emma began frequently mentioning her boss, Greg Sanderson. At first, she casually described him as driven and talented, a visionary leader. Jacob didn't think much of it until the tone of her mention shifted. Her words carried an almost reverent warmth, and admiration crept into her voice. Greg wasn't just her boss. He seemed to have become someone Emma deeply respected, perhaps even more. Initially, Jacob chalked it up to professional admiration, but soon, the work dinners that were once occasional turned into a weekly occurrence. Emma was rarely home, and the knot in Jacob's stomach tightened with each passing week. Whenever he brought up his concerns, Emma always had logical explanations. The booming real estate market required long hours, and Greg's ambitious plans demanded extra effort from the team. Jacob wanted to trust her. After all, trust had never been an issue in their relationship. But then, one evening, he stumbled across something that shattered his peace. Scrolling through social media, Jacob came across a photo posted by one of Emma's colleagues. The image, a candid snapshot from a company event earlier that day, showed Emma and Greg standing close together in the background. Their smiles were wide, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that felt uncomfortably intimate for a professional setting. Jacob stared at the photo, his mind racing. Was he reading too much into it? Or was there something more between them? Try as he might, he couldn't shake the doubts that had taken root. A week later, those doubts deepened. Emma came home late one evening, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling with excitement. She mentioned Greg had invited her to a private gathering at his house, a small party for a select few senior employees. Jacob had never been invited to one of Greg's gatherings before, and when he suggested accompanying her, Emma hesitated. "I'm not sure it's that kind of party," she said cautiously. "It's more of a work thing, team bonding. It might be awkward if you're there." Her response didn't sit well with Jacob. Why would it be awkward? He'd always gotten along with her colleagues in the past. There was a subtle nervousness in her voice that only fueled his suspicions. "I'm sure Greg wouldn't mind," Jacob said, keeping his tone casual. "I'd like to meet your team and see the people you spend so much time with." Emma's smile faltered for just a moment that confirmed what Jacob already feared. She didn't want him there. But why? What was she hiding? The rest of the week passed uneventfully, but Jacob couldn't push the growing unease aside. On Saturday, as Emma prepared for the party, his concerns only deepened. She spent hours getting ready, slipping into a gold dress that hugged her figure perfectly. Jacob couldn't remember the last time she'd put so much effort into her appearance for a work event. She kissed him on the cheek and waved goodbye, her bright smile disappearing the moment she stepped out the door. Jacob sat in silence for a few minutes before making up his mind. He needed answers. Later that evening, Jacob found himself parked outside Greg Sanderson's sprawling mansion in the upscale Mossman suburb overlooking Sydney Harbor. The house was a testament to wealth and power, its grandeur intimidating. Jacob had never felt at home in places like this, but tonight wasn't about comfort. It was about the truth his heart was pounding with a mix of rage, fear, and unease as he walked down the streets. Jacob wasn't sure what awaited him, but he knew he had to uncover the truth about what Emma had been hiding. The party was in full swing when he arrived at Greg's mansion, and he discreetly slipped through a side door to avoid drawing attention. The backyard was packed with guests, men in sharp suits and women in elegant dresses, all laughing and mingling as if their lives were free of worry. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and cigars, and the clinking of glasses blended with hushed conversations. Jacob scanned the crowd, his pulse quickening. Then he saw her. Emma stood by the pool, her arm casually draped over Greg's shoulder as they shared a conversation. Their faces were so close that it almost seemed as though they were in their own world. Jacob's stomach churned as he watched Greg whisper something in Emma's ear, causing her to laugh. Her hand rested on his chest. The scene felt like a gut punch. The woman he had loved for years, the one he trusted, was standing there, looking at another man in a way she used to look at him. For a moment, Jacob wanted to turn around and walk away. Perhaps it would be easier to ignore the painful truth, to not confront the reality of the situation. But something inside him screamed to keep going. With a pounding heart, Jacob made his way toward them. Emma noticed him just as their eyes met. Her smile faltered, and her face paled. She hadn't expected him to show up. She hadn't expected to be caught. "What are you doing here?" Emma's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes wide with surprise. "I could ask you the same thing," Jacob replied, his tone calm but firm. "But I already know the answer." The noise of the party seemed to fade away as the tension thickened between the three of them. Greg shifted uncomfortably, his confident demeanor cracking under the pressure. He opened his mouth, but Jacob interrupted him. "This is between me and my wife," Jacob said coldly, his gaze locked on Emma. Emma's lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but in the end, she remained silent. The truth was there, written clearly on her face. There was no denying it. She had betrayed him, and they all knew it. Jacob's emotions surged: anger, sadness, disbelief. He had given Emma everything: his trust, his love, his loyalty. And she had tossed it all aside without a second thought. Without another word, Jacob turned and walked away, leaving Emma and Greg standing there in stunned silence. Jacob drove home in a daze, his thoughts racing, his emotions spiraling. It felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him, and the world he once knew had come undone. How had it come to this? How could the woman he had loved, the one he had built his life with, betray him in such a way? When Jacob got home, the house was empty and cold. He sank down onto the sofa, staring blankly at the wall, replaying the events of the night over and over. He couldn't believe it. Emma, the woman he had trusted completely, had been cheating on him for months. For the next few days, Jacob remained in a state of numbness. Emma came home late that night, but Jacob didn't confront her. He wasn't ready. He needed time to process everything and figure out how to move forward. Emma didn't press him. It was as though she sensed a shift in their relationship. They moved through the house like strangers, each wrapped up in their own thoughts. A week later, Jacob could no longer hold it in. He finally spoke to her, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma looked at him with tear-filled eyes, filled with regret. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "I never thought it would go this far." Jacob's anger flared again. "You never thought it would come to this, Emma? You've been cheating on me for months. How could you?" Emma broke down in tears, but Jacob felt no sympathy for her. She had brought this upon herself, and now she had to face the consequences. In the weeks that followed, Jacob struggled to come to terms with the betrayal. The hurt was deep, and the trust that once existed between him and Emma was gone. They tried to talk, but every conversation ended in anger and tears. Eventually, Jacob realized that their marriage was beyond saving. The damage was too great, and he couldn't continue living in a constant state of suspicion and pain. They made the difficult decision to separate, and Jacob moved out of the home they had shared for so many years. The process was painful and filled with uncertainty, but over time, Jacob began to heal. He found solace in his work, in the support of his friends, and in the quiet moments alone. Slowly, he learned to let go of his anger, to forgive himself for not seeing the signs earlier, and to move on with his life. Jacob came to understand that sometimes the people we love aren't who we think they are. Betrayal can be excruciating, but it can also reveal truths we need to face, no matter how difficult they are. Sometimes, the end of one chapter opens the door to a new and beautiful beginning.